All right, welcome everyone. I'm here in, where are we?
Falls Church,
Thank
Virginia.
you, Falls Church, Virginia. On the road at the State Theater, playing a gig with my friend Mark Wenner tonight. And I think we go back quite a ways. I want to say I've known you since the 90s at least.
Yeah, we did a show here in this venue 20
We did 20 years ago at the State Theater's the last
with the
time I
late
played
great
here.
James Harmon and
Right.
Greg Fingers Taylor.
Greg Fingers Taylor.
Well,
and-
not
yeah.
is he okay? What's his? Not familiar.
Not
with
really.
What's going
Yeah,
on with
he's had a lot of health issues. So yeah, he's having a tough time these days. But anyway, it's good to see you, buddy. Yeah, you've always been
Likewise.
a real help, man. You have.
Well,
And yeah, you've been doing this longer than most people, man. I mean, you know.
well, the band did 50 years last year. That
Wow.
was a 50-year celebration all year. And now it's 51. It's kind of anticlimactic.
Yeah, you
Hey,
can't
we're
really
51. It's our 51st anniversary.
you can't really get away with that.
Yeah, but the band's been incredibly active the last couple of years, even weirdly through the pandemic, and we had a safe house where we met once a week, and if someone felt exposed, we'd skip 2 weeks till everybody felt cool again, and we made an album doing pre-production and then studio, a lot of production in the studio, which is real unusual for us. Usually we'll work up 10 songs in an afternoon and play them for 6 months
Right.
or a year, and then we'll walk in the studio and we'll just play them.
Yeah.
And maybe add a guitar solo to a rhythm part or something. But
Right.
this time, I mean, we wrote these songs and worked them up and created them kind of. It was an unusual process for us. And then even when we went in the studio, we were still doing pre-production, if you will, although we started cutting stuff pretty right away as far as rhythm tracks and all.
Now, the Nighthawks has to be one of the most famous East Coast blues bands, I think, since the 70s, right?
Right, we started in 72 as our
72,
official start.
yeah.
So,
And it was you and Jimmy Thackeray together?
Right, and then
Pete Ragusa?
right, and Jan Zakowski.
Okay,
That
Jan's-
band solidified in June of 74.
And you had the rhythm section with you for a long time.
Yeah.
After
Jan
Thackeray.
stayed 32 years and Pete stayed 36 years.
Wow.
I mean, it's the same problem the Nighthawks always had. He couldn't put us in a box. We weren't
Right.
really a blues rock band.
Right.
We weren't really.
You guys covered a lot of ground, and it made it really difficult for record companies to say, "Well, where do we put him in the record store?" Yeah.
Well, it wasn't until the Blasters and Los Lobos came that the critics came up with this term roots rock.
Right.
Well, that would have worked great, but when we were trying to make it big and with Mercury and stuff, I mean, I remember we had a whole new group of people at Mercury who had changed the company completely.
Right.
We got hired by a guy who was the headquarters in Chicago. They all got axed. Chicago got closed. Some guys in New York took over.
So you basically lost allies that you
completely,
had. Yeah.
completely. Yeah. And so we took a second record. The first record was kind of didn't really happen.
Yeah.
And we made a second record, and we took it up to these guys we didn't know, and they said, "Well, we hear a blues song here and a kind of a rockabilly song here, and this is sort of like
Soul
Memphis
tune
soul,
here. Yeah, right.
and we don't know how to market this." And I'm saying, "Well, that's your job. You know, I made the music."
You know, but there's so many great bands that had that happen.
You
I
know,
mean, Commander Cody, Amazing Rhythm Aces, so many
Right.
that were in that same
If they had roots
position.
rock, they could have
Yeah.
made a little box and put us all in it.
And you're right, the Blasters were one of
Blasters
the
and-
first successful
Right.
groups to
I
kind of
couldn't believe their first album. I said,
Right.
"What's the same
same kind of thing.
kind of shit
They were
we're doing?"
but they were after you guys. That was the difference.
At least in terms of, we were just probably too early putting out material before we had really matured enough. Although
Yeah.
our first album, in some ways, is extraordinary. And I remember I mean, Janet Pete joined the band in June.
Mm-hmm.
We had August off. In September, we went in the studio. And then we cut these tracks, and then we all went into the studio with this engineer who was pretty good. And he, after about an hour, he kicked us out. Because everybody's going, oh, turn the hard up, turn my vocal up.
Right.
He said, out, everybody out. I'll tell you when to come back. And we came back like 2 or 3 days later, and I couldn't believe what he played us. It's like, he made us sound good.
Wow.
I mean, we were simple. One thing was everything was so simple and simple.
Right.
And it just really worked, and he just put it all together.
So this was Mercury.
No. This is Aladdin.
Really?
This is Aladdin. This is
the
rock
same
and roll.
Aladdin?
Well, it wasn't the same. You gotta understand. Billy Hancock, that was with Danny and the Fat Boys, the bass player, Danny Gatton and the Fat Boys.
Right.
The first album on Aladdin, our Aladdin, was Danny and the Fat Boys, American Music, and then us with rock and roll, and then Powerhouse with Nightlife. That's the album catalog, period.
Right.
As far as I understand, somebody told Billy on the phone he could use the name Aladdin.
Wow.
He just ran with it. And I think somewhere
Unbelievable.
after the thing had all completely crashed,
Right. Then they got
somebody
mad.
said, you can't use that name.
Right.
It's like, well, you're too late now.
It's too late, brother. Yeah.
But it wasn't like, but I mean, our album got a lot of attention in ways that even Danny's and the Powerhouse album didn't get.
And Powerhouse was Tom Principato and
George Lay,
Right.
Pierre Beauregard.
Pierre, yeah.
I mean, and that's their
Was
first.
Deanna Bogart in that?
No, she was in Cowboy Jazz,
Okay.
which I played on their first album.
Oh, okay.
Because my childhood hoodlum buddy was their roadie.
Right. And she's from here, too.
Huh?
She's from
Yeah,
here.
absolutely.
And then the other ones that we were talking about earlier is Bobby Radcliffe and his brother Bruce.
Right.
Bruce Ewan.
Right. The birth
And
of the blues.
they were from around here. So you guys really, in DC, there was definitely a scene of young players, growing up in the late 60s, early 70s, that were, doing blues and soul and roots, basically roots music, man.
Yeah, because you got to understand, DC, the music we got to hear was so mixed.
Yeah.
The radio stations, especially in the 50s, and I started listening to the radio in 56, 57, it was wide open, and I would hear Big Joe Turner and Johnny Cash in the same hour.
Right.
I would hear, doo-wop and Jimmy Reed and John Lee Hooker,
Right.
all as rock and roll. In about 58, 59, I mean, I was a paranoid little kid. I actually thought that they were messing with us. I mean, this is how sick I was. I said, well, Elvis is in the Army. They banned Jerry Lee Lewis. Chuck Berry's in jail. Ray Charles is in detox.
And
Little
Richard
went to the
church.
I said, this is someone's fucking with us.
Yeah.
This is not.
I could see where you would say
And then
that.
all of a sudden we had Frankie Avalon and Fabian and Bobby Rydell instead of Gene Vincent and Eddie Cochran.
It was almost like they got rid of all the rabble rousers.
Absolutely. They got some cute boys that had nice hair. And some of them could sing. Bobby Rydell could sing his ass off. But Fabian, they almost invented
him.
the single.
It's like the Monkees in the 60s.
Yeah. But for Fabian, I understand they almost invented the line-by-line recording. They'd record one line till they got it close enough, and then they'd move on.
Yeah.
Everybody just went in the studio with the whole band and sang,
Yeah.
They didn't care if someone fucked up a little bit somewhere as long as they got a hot take. But Elvis and Chuck Berry, I understand they were doing 30, 40 takes of songs.
Really?
It's a whole different approach as opposed to doing one take and then fixing everything.
Right.
Which is more like.
But initially, they started as guys that went in and just did one take or two takes.
Well, I don't really
Chuck
know.
did, I think.
Apparently, Chuck did a lot of takes on stuff.
Did he?
That's what I told.
At Chess? Really? Okay.
But I don't. That I may be full of shit.
Yeah, I don't know what the story is. So one of the things I was curious. So Mercury What were some of the, you said Epic you guys did a record for?
No. Our
was-
only big label. We went from Aladdin,
Yeah.
which then failed. We moved over to another local label, Adelphi,
Okay.
which had done an extraordinary amount of like acoustic blues recordings. But
Right.
the guy didn't want blues. He wanted us to rock out, and he did us and the All Stars.
That's the Charlottesville All Stars.
And we made his most successful stuff with us was when we actually just played blues. The first album we did for him was called Open All Night, which because we had
That's the one with the Hopper painting,
Edward
right?
Hopper,
right,
the Nighthawks on the
yeah.
cover. Now we had ambitions to become pop stars, so I said, well, this is the time if we're going to do an all blues album, we should do it now because we won't be able to do it later. Of course, what you really have to do is become a huge star, and then you make your blues
Right.
album.
Good point. Yeah. Yeah.
But so we did Open All Night, which again, the first album got some attention.
Yeah.
Open All Night got reviewed in Playboy.
I remember that got a
Review.
lot of attention.
And
Yeah.
I think our timing was so perfect because it had been so long since you had the 60s white boy blues bands,
Right.
the Siegel Schwalls and the
Yeah.
Paul Butterfields and the Blues
And this was
Projects.
the early 70s by this time.
Yeah, this was actually 76.
Oh, okay. So it was
The
76.
first one
All right.
came, Rock and Roll came out in 75.
Okay.
And Open All Night came out in 76, and Live at the Psychedelic came out in 76.
Uh-huh.
And those two things kind of really put us on the map. One, everybody was ready for some white boys playing straight up blues.
East Coast blues, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, in a sense, the other band that I was going to say that was around that was doing something similar to you guys was, I mean, Jay Giles was kind of doing something very similar to you
kind of
guys
parallel
early.
with a lot more, maybe a lot more something.
Yeah.
I mean, when the first Jay Giles album came out, I was still living in New York. And my friend Greg Geller, who became a big deal record executive, but he wasn't quite there yet, called me up and said, somebody just put out your album. I said, what do you mean? He said, you got to come over and listen to this. I was like, someone beat me to it. Because even Pack Fair and Square is almost like a little rockabilly-ish.
Right,
You know?
it is kind of.
We were still in formative stages, and Jay Giles played at the University of Maryland, and I made the whole band go hear him. Well, I went, they did it twice, so I went once, I think, by myself, and then the second time I went, I had everybody that was in the band at the time there. I said, this is what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
This is it here. And I actually put these flyers on everybody's car in the parking lot. I drew Donald Duck with a big bushy hairdo because I was sporting a big dude like Magic Dick,
right?
Playing a harp with a little amp.
Right.
And it said, if you like the Jay Giles band, you'll love the Nighthawks. If you bring this flyer, you'll get a free beer at this club we were playing.
Right.
I don't know how I mean, I was very ambitious at that time, and I would do anything I could.
Right.
Now I'm lazy as shit. I don't know. I'm doing an interview with you,
but
you're my pal. You know?
Yeah, that's what happens when you get old. You know, yeah. All that ambition just goes out the window.
I swear.
But so basically, Mercury was the big label that you guys wrote.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I
remember you telling me about a story about playing in Muscle Shoals. Were you guys recording down there?
Yeah.
At the studio.
Right, but Dylan was down the hall.
Right, and you said Dylan was there
doing the Saved album, and they sent a guy over to borrow a E-flat harp.
Okay, so they knew you were in the studio.
I said only if Bob Dylan autographs the box, because I knew he didn't like signing autographs.
Right.
So I got me a box with Bob.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
All the best Bob Dylan.
Did you guys talk?
Not really. We encountered him. Jerry Wexler was producing him.
Okay.
So at one point we were both on a break at the same time in the pool room.
Right.
With the pinball machines. And
right.
He reminded me of me when I was 13 or 14 hanging around the pool hall trying to not get beat up by the 8, 16, and 17-year-olds.
Interesting.
You know, he kind of just like a cool but tough demeanor.
Kind of
but
detached.
He was also tiny.
Yeah.
But I love the pictures of him as a kid riding these big old Harleys and shit.
Right. That's right.
There's a great picture of his dad.
Yeah.
On a mid-30s Harley.
Really?
Yeah, looking very much like Bob.
What a trip. Well, yeah, he was a bike rider for sure.
Apparently, yeah.
Well, he got in that bad rep.
Right.
Yeah.
But back in Minnesota, it was still Harleys.
Right.
Still the big stuff, not the fast little Triumphs.
Yeah. Now, how long were you and Thackeray working together?
14 years.
14 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how did that? I mean, I know you have to be diplomatic about this, but what was kind of the separation point with that?
Well,
just some different directions, or
he seemed to think he was moving in other directions musically.
Yeah.
And I mean, we got Greg Wetzel in the band because Jimmy wanted to start writing stuff that needed a keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jimmy needed somebody who would stay up and drink with him all night, which Wetzel was highly qualified to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't.
So was your idea to keep it a quartet? That was kind of really your mission, was to keep it a quartet. Yeah.
I think that ultimately there's certain magic in the Beatles as far as the balance of four. Where the Stones, it's like Mick and Keith and what's that other guy's name? I'm not sure we remember their names, but
yeah.
John, Paul, George, and Ringo.
Right.
They were always, they were easy. Everybody knew everybody's name. Everybody was visible. And even if you listen to a lot of those albums from that period, like Jan would sing one song, like Ringo would sing one song. Pete would sing maybe two songs, like George Harrison would have a different lean, and then me and Thackeray split it up. Paul and John.
Yeah.
Now, one thing we did when we wrote, no matter who brought what into the song, into the package, we published them as written by all four of us.
So that's, I know Jig Isles did that. They had a thing called Juke Joint Jimmy was when it was all five of them.
Right.
Let's take a break here and come back. I'm trying to do these in 20 minutes. All right, we are back with Mark Wenner of the Nighthawks, and we're talking about the quartet of the Nighthawks and how you've pretty much kept that intact.
It's true, and as much as I love having a second guitar or keyboard, I've always tried to make the harp not just something that comes in for a solo here and there, but it's part of the whole band sound, the rhythm section.
Right. You know who kind of did that was Musselwhite. Sort of did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I mean he would keep playing generally.
Oh yeah.
Even though the guitar player was playing a solo, he'd keep playing.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what he would do.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, you guys have been 50 years. That's an incredible 51 years. That's an incredible length of time to have a group together.
It's kind of insane. I mean, even though I'm the only one.
And how old are you? You're 74.
I'll be 75 in November.
Wow. Okay. All right. So you're still traveling. You're not doing. You said you don't really want to do Europe as much, and you're really kind of more into staying in the. I
don't want to get on
States.
airplanes.
You're just not into going on airplanes. Yeah.
For sure.
So you pretty much, when you guys do your touring, you're driving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or walking.
Yeah.
But.
And I remember, the first time I saw you was when you guys came out to San Francisco for the Blues Festival.
Oh yeah.
Now, was that your first West Coast trip when you did that, or
was that
did you come out before that?
At Golden Gate Park or in the
downtown? Golden Gate Park. It was I want to say it was
with James Cotton and Rod Piazza and
James Cotton wasn't there. Rod might have been there. I want to say it was 1978. It was 1978 because I have it on the poster.
That would have been our first trip for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
I thought we didn't get out there till 80, but I may be wrong.
No, you were in 78. I have the poster.
Oh, that's the park, the real park where all the Grateful Dead shit happened.
Right, it's the band show where they had the band show.
Because then later we played the park at the top
Oh, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the Presidio.
Yeah, we
The
played a
Presidio
festival
in
up there.
Fort Mason.
That
yeah.
would have been 83 or 4.
Yeah, that's when he moved.
Piazza walked the crowd with him wireless, and James Cotton. I got pictures of me and James
Right.
Cotton. And
Yeah, that would have been that was later on.
And the
Yeah.
cell-
So 81, he moved it to Fort Mason.
uh-huh.
And so really, I mean, you guys were in a lot of ways. You were really locked in as an East Coast band in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well,
I mean, you guys would go from basically Maine to Florida and back and forth. Did you do the Midwest much?
Well, initially what we did was in 76 we started going to Boston and Atlanta.
Right.
Up and down, back and forth. And in 78 we went, you say California, I don't quite remember that, but I remember going to Chicago, to Denver, Boulder, Denver, down to Austin, and then New Orleans. We did that circle.
Yeah.
And then in 81, I think, we jumped from Salt Lake City. We met up with Muddy Waters Band in
Right.
Seattle,
Right.
and went all the way down to San Diego with them.
So that's pretty cool to tour with those
Oh,
guys.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Incredible. A lot of
And you already knew those guys.
Yeah.
I mean, they were, because
Well,
I remember you recorded with
This
Muddy's band, or at least Pine Top and
but this
Junior.
wasn't those guys, unfortunately.
Right.
This was after the Mutiny.
Right. That was
So
was
we
after
knew
the
those
Mutiny.
guys.
Right.
We recorded with them.
Right.
It was
But essentially, you guys had a big time connection with Margolin, Guitar Junior, and Pine Top.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you knew Willie and
Calvin and Willie.
Calvin really well.
They were both they're all on Jackson King's. The only
Right.
one, Jerry recorded a couple of songs and then decided he didn't want to give it up because he's already thinking of the legendary blues.
Right. Right.
And of course we couldn't get money.
Right.
But we were recording those Jackson King's tracks. We were playing 2 shows a night at the Cellar Door. And that commercial album we did in 77, Side Pocket Shot, we had the studio blocked out for a month with all our shit set up.
Right.
So in the middle of that month, we ended up doing five days with Muddy at the Cellar Door here.
Yeah.
And we would play 2 shows, and then everybody would go to the studio in Silver Spring, and everything would be set up, and we'd just start jamming.
Yeah.
And then we'd go home when sun came up, and then sleep, and then play the show the next night. And I think we did that a couple nights in a row.
Wow.
So
That's
we just
pretty cool.
turned Pine Top. We had Dave Maxwell in tow as well, just to
okay.
spice things up. Muddy had suggested him if we wanted a piano player, we ought to think about him.
Right. Yeah. Well, he was definitely a guy that played with everybody, man.
Yeah, he was amazing.
He was amazing. Yeah.
I used to when we started going to Boston a lot we would stay at the Powerhouse House, which was Principato, Pierre Beauregard, Doug J, and Jeff, the Memphis Rockabilly Band. I don't mess with my tail. But anyway, you got 4 guys with the most incredible record collections ever. A lot of marijuana, a lot of staying up all night, and tapping into all this incredible collections of music.
Right.
And then, so we were sleeping bags on the living room floor, and then I started staying over at Maxwell's house, and we stayed up and listened to really crazy shit,
Yeah.
He played the Shags. We had been listening to some space jazz or something. It's like 5:30 in the morning, and he comes up with Philosophy of the World by the Shags. I mean, my brain just melted at that time. Like, what are you playing for?
That's great. Yeah. Well, it's funny how, a lot of people aren't around anymore, huh? Of our generation. It's weird.
No.
Now, did Jeff Sarley play with you guys? Did he ever work in that?
Pretty much briefly.
Nighthawks?
Jeff and I worked together in a thing called the Blue Rider Trio.
Okay.
With the late Ben Andrews. So I'm the only survivor of the Blue Rider Trio.
Now, who is Ben Andrews?
Ben Andrews was a local finger picker. He did all the Robert Johnson, Blind Blake, all that kind of stuff, acoustic. And it was kind of hot tuna-like, where it'd be a Blind Willie McTell song that would have some extended jamming kind of mixed in.
Right.
But as
You guys wanted the Coronas, yeah?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm back with Mark Wenner, and we're talking about just the scene in DC and the Nighthawks and all the different people that you worked with, Muddy Waters and his band, and Bobby Radcliffe, who I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, because you know Bobby from when? When did you and Bobby Radcliffe?
well, I didn't know him, but we were in the same school when he was in the 4th and I was in the 8th grade.
Really?
So we're in the same yearbook.
Wow.
But as a 4th grader, he just looks like a little kid, and I had already, had my greased hair and pegged pants and white socks and pointy loafers.
Yeah, that's
thinking I
great.
was somebody, but
Yeah. So Bobby Radcliffe is a guy that is from DC, but he ended up moving to New York, and he was on Blacktop Records for a while.
that was a great period. His Blacktop records.
Yeah, those are great records.
Fantastic.
And then he ended up just recently. No one ever thought he'd get out of New York. But
Really?
he ended up in Asheville, North Carolina. So we saw him last year, and you guys go way back.
Well, yeah, and I just got out of high school, and one of my buddies had rented a little house sort of in the woods where there's now a shopping center.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I'm having a party, and my younger cousins got a band, and they play blues, and you should bring some harps. So there was these 16-year-olds, right? And they were doing the canned heat boogie thing. Bobby
Really?
had one of the first Vox distortion boosters,
What a
totally
trip.
channeling Henry Vestine at that
Yeah.
moment.
And was that Bruce as well, his brother?
No.
Oh.
Bruce comes along much
Okay.
later. Bruce was
All right.
very young at this point.
Okay.
Bobby was 16, so
Yeah.
Bruce was probably 9,
Yeah.
if that. Because a few years later, Bobby and I did a little This is the Blues workshop to Bruce's 7th grade class.
Wow.
In fact, we're playing a party tomorrow with Bruce is going to come sit in with us for a gal that was in that class too.
What a trip.
But Bobby, when I left for New York in '66, and I would come home.
Now, were you living there at that point?
New York?
Yeah.
Yeah, I lived in New York in '66 to '72.
Oh, okay.
And Bobby would come visit me,
All right.
liking the New York vibe. But I would come home for Christmas break or whatever, and he would be playing locally at these joints, and I would come sit in. Then when I moved back here, he had quite a nice thing going on. He had an integrated band, 2 black guys, 2 white guys. He was getting the gigs in the hippie joints, and the black guys were getting gigs in these
Soul
incredibly
places,
lush black clubs,
yeah.
which no shortage of in D.C.
Right.
I mean, it was the pimp hat era, you
Yeah,
know, and
yeah.
the plush everything. And,
Yeah.
I was pretty shameless, but I just started. I moved back here in February '72, and just went to almost every gig he played, and he didn't kill me.
Yeah.
I ended up stealing his drummer, basically. His drummer said, well, you know, because his drummer liked my concept, which was different from Bobby's. And he started kind of courting me. He said, I really like what you mind with Dry. And he had a bass player that would jam, but couldn't commit because he just had a kid and had to keep his top 40 job where he made $120 a week.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, you know, I kept sitting in with Bobby and all, but his drummer we started trying out different guitar players. Nobody rang the bell until Thackeray came along. And
Oh, okay.
Thackeray got kicked out of the Crawling King Snake Blues band that moved to Boston to become Powerhouse with Principato.
Okay.
The whole band went up there except
Yeah.
for Jimmy.
Except for Jimmy,
Well,
I didn't know that.
Charlie Hubel told me about that day, and that night I was over at Jimmy's, and the next night I had him in my parents' basement, and we could have done a gig. We later went out to where there was a jam session going on.
Uh-huh.
And we had so much in common, because in Crawling King Snake band, they played Little Walter note for note, Junior Wells and Buddy Guy note for note.
Interesting. Wow.
And I had been wallowing in that material.
Right.
So,
Right.
Jimmy didn't sing at all at that point. He was
Mhm.
17. He looked at his feet, played a Rickenbacker, but he knew, he had learned note for note, and he's
All that
really
stuff,
good
yeah.
at knowing note for note.
Yeah.
But I could have pulled any little Walter song out of my
And he would have
hat.
known it,
He would have
yeah.
known the parts. And especially,
That's what a harp player wants, man.
I had really, in my thing in New York was you couldn't really play shuffles and people wouldn't dance.
Right.
So I was really relying on Booker T, Junior Walker, and Buddy Guy Junior Wells stuff, which was all James Brown grooves. In fact, I did some James Brown shamelessly.
Right.
But the thing is, you couldn't, in my New York bands, the guys were all playing through huge amplifiers, and I was singing through a Bogan 35-watt amp. So even though I looked like I knew what I was doing, you couldn't hear me at all. I think I was singing through one custom cabinet. The rhythm guitar player was playing the Ampeg.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Playing, like with a V4. Bass player was playing an SVT.
Right.
The lead guitar player was playing through a Super. Rhythm guitar player was playing through a Super. I had deluxe reverb.
Wow.
And a Bogan 35-watt amp to sing through. So I don't think you could hear
We got a case
Well, I
of waters
could-
for you guys. We put
Okay,
on stage,
thank
and
you
then
so
another one's
much.
over in the other room.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So Thackeray was the maestro of all the traditional
It really
harp
clicked.
style blues.
There
Yeah.
is a somewhere there exists a cassette of the first night. With this bass player would come to my house and jam with us, but and we did one. So there's a cassette of us in my parents' basement, and there's a reel-to-reel of us playing a wedding party for a friend of mine that I don't think I've ever heard. It probably is completely deteriorated, but it clicked. It really clicked. The drummer, was pretty good. We went through a lot of different bass players initially, and then we had a situation where we were getting pretty popular, where I knew I could offer that top 40 money. So we went and checked out drummers and bass players, thinking we would keep one or the other.
Yeah.
And then Jan and Pete ended up in
And they clicked.
and it was just holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And right then, our fifth man who played piano and guitar was secretly rehearsing with the brand new Roslyn Mountain Boys to run off and do country stuff.
Really?
And they were like the Nighthawks, the honky-tonk Nighthawks.
Interesting. Wow.
And we didn't know that he was missing rehearsals because he was rehearsing with them.
Wow.
And so the last night of the old rhythm section, we all went out to smoke a joint, and Peter goes, "Oh, by the way, this is my last night too."
Wow.
I had to go to Pete and Jan and say, "Well, dudes, if you join to play with him,
Right.
even though you haven't got to play with him much."
Yeah.
And he's the one that really brought Little Feat into the band and stuff like that. Of course, we went on to
The keyboard guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we went on to, with the Jan and Pete and me and Jimmy. We did a whole set of just Little Feat.
Really?
The only song that wasn't Little Feat was Memo from Turner.
So you guys really had a very, very wide selection of styles that you were doing by that time.
By that time, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
now, do you guys have like kind of, would you say you have like a biker following? I mean, have you played things like Sturgis?
oh
or,
yeah,
Have you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We went to Sturgis once. We've been to Daytona every year for
Every year,
for 45 years.
Right. How about like Myrtle Beach and stuff like that?
We never really played Myrtle Beach.
Uh-huh.
I went to Myrtle Beach once as a civilian and just watched the pagans and Hell's Angels try to kill each other. And said, I don't need to be here.
No,
The
thank you. Yeah.
Sturgis 1990 was pretty cool.
Right.
Because we had Jimmy Hall and Jimmy Knowles.
Oh,
And
okay.
we played with Marshall Tucker one night, and of course they were buddies with Marshall Tucker.
Yeah.
And we played with John Kay one night.
Really?
And
Yeah,
I'll
I
tell
saw
you
John
what.
Kay one time at the Myrtle Beach, the big biker thing in Myrtle Beach.
Right.
And it was like my drummer and I were standing there watching like literally 3,000 bikers singing Born to Be Wild together. And my drummer was just in hysterics.
This is
He
the
was like,
moment.
"This is it."
Well, that's what. There was this moon come up. We were backstage at Sturgis, and and he's playing Born to Be Wild. And the Club The Outlaws was there in its entirety.
Yeah.
They all fired up their bikes. One.
Oh,
The
man.
moon is coming up. It's just the biggest moon you ever saw.
Yeah,
I was hanging out.
That's
with my
kind of like
buddy.
what we saw, because it was sunset, I think, when he was doing it. And, man, I'm telling you, I've never seen a guy get in a limo so quick.
Get me out of here.
He got done with that song, and he was in that limo within seconds of the ending. Yeah. But did you work with Hammond a lot? Didn't you?
Oh,
You and John Hammond?
Yes, he was a hero.
Right.
Funny, because I initially didn't like his records.
Mhm.
I was kind of racially prejudiced about white people singing blues.
Right.
I wasn't really crazy about his early, the way he would sing and try to be whatever it was, maybe trying to be too black.
Right.
But I started hearing him in New York when he had the little trio, and Joe Dicey on harp, and
Bill Dicey.
Bill Dicey on
Right.
Joe's the son,
Right.
and Charles.
Not Jimmy Spurl.
No, but the rhythm section, black rhythm section, New York rhythm section. Charles Otis.
Oh, yeah,
And
right.
They're on
right.
the Sooner or Later album.
Right.
One few times he recorded with his own band.
Right.
And he was playing the Les Paul and standing up, and so I got really into that.
Mm-hmm.
And he recorded I Can Tell, Sooner or Later, and Southern Fried, all of which I think are extraordinary albums that
Right.
had the thing that the first Jay Giles album had. They had
That mix.
it wasn't that Vanguard, a little too polite,
Right.
kind of gets in, don't let anything get out of hand. It was in your face,
Are those on Vanguard, those
Atlantic,
records?
Atlantic.
Those are on Atlantic.
That was
okay.
the deal.
All right.
Two of them
Okay.
are on Atlantic, one might be on Columbia.
Mhm.
But they had the sound and the impact.
Were those Jerry Wexler things?
I'm not sure. I Can Tell had Bill Wyman and Charlie Watts and guy from the band, Robbie Robertson.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, just
I know Robbie Robertson's on that first, that Vanguard
the
record.
early stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this was just out of the park. And then when I moved back here, I went to see him at Cellar Door and just kind of crashed the dressing room and made friends with him.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, after coming back and seeing him more, the number of times I guess I got to play with him just myself.
Right.
And then I kept saying, can we come back you up somewhere? And I figured we'd do it acoustically, and we sort of did at a local joint here, and then we started playing with them a lot. And when we got with the Rosebud Agency,
Right.
it was
Then it was kind of set.
it was too
Because,
easy for them to book
Package you,
two acts.
yeah.
And we also, because we had production, we had a PA and roadies and stuff.
Right.
We got a lot of like college gigs with Muddy.
Right.
Because they didn't have to buy a PA,
Right.
So the Rosebud period was kind of the golden era.
So you guys actually traveling by bus and stuff during that
It was
time?
all vans.
Always vans, yeah.
and cars.
Yeah.
Well, we had a truck.
You had a truck that took the
with
PA and
the PA
stuff?
and everything.
Okay.
And we were up to 3 guys on the road with the 4 of us.
Wow.
And then we had a woman at home on telephone.
Wow.
I mean, we even were at a point where we had everybody on Blue Cross Blue Shield, everybody on guaranteed
That's some serious income,
$500 a week.
Damn.
We sent our roadies to the store with a list of harps and strings and
Wow.
picks and whatever else you
Yeah.
buy regular. I mean, in those days, I'd walk on stage and flip my amp off a standby.
That was it.
I was showing up like
Right.
5 minutes to 9 with a packed house,
Welcome to my world. Those days are over.
Now I got my own PA.
Yeah,
I
tell
can
me
set
about
it
it,
up
man.
and it's like,
No, I was talking to my friend Terry Hank about
I know Terry.
we were talking about Elvin and how Elvin had that huge hit, and they were in limos, and they were staying at 5-star hotels. And he goes, within a year or something, it started dropping, and pretty soon they're back in vans, and then they're staying at funkier hotels. And it's kind of like, what happened?
Well,
that's just reality in the business.
Yeah, and the fact that someone else sang the song.
Right.
True. We worked with Elvin after that when he refused to do the song. Now
he does it as an instrumental.
As a slide instrumental,
right.
and he has backup singing. So
right.
you get the phrasing. But he would not do it when we were working with him. And we worked with him when he transitioned from a drunk to a sober guy.
Right. I remember.
The drunk stuff was actually pretty rough.
Oh yeah.
And a little hard to handle. But
I know.
But
no, I saw that.
I remember being in Cleveland, and we finished the set, and these middle-aged women, he'd be gone.
Yeah.
We'd be out there taking the shit down, and
right.
You didn't play the song. You didn't play Fooled Around.
Well, that's that thing I always, my friend told me about years ago. He said, there was this point where, when you have a hit, you better have one you like, because when you don't, you're going to be forced to play that motherfucker until the end of days, basically.
Sure, and what was that song, Brandy, by...
Oh, yeah.
That band didn't play anything else like that.
Right,
and I don't know how that even got...
I don't even know who that band was, but yeah.
Looking Glass.
Yeah, okay.
What you need, Daddy-O?
Okay. Well, anyway, we should probably wrap things up because I think
hopefully we'll see some food here.
Dinner here in a minute.
Yeah.
But anyway, man, it's great talking with you, Mark.
Likewise.
Always great to see you, and thanks for sharing some of these stories about the old days, man.
Yeah, indeed.
Because
it's been a good run.
Yeah, you guys have had a hell of a run.
We've seen a lot of cool stuff in our time, and got to meet and play with so many of our heroes,
well, that's that's.
Elvin
I'm very thankful for all that. That I haven't gotten to play as I wasn't able to play with Muddy, unfortunately, but a lot of the other people.
We just did some stuff with Muddy's son, and it's
right. That's what I heard with Mud.
Not quite as great, but it's pretty cool.
He sings a lot like him.
And he moves.
Yeah, he kind of studied the hell out of the end of Muddy's career.
Yeah, he really
studied it.
Channeling.
Yeah, his voice really sounds like more than anyone else.
Yeah, it's a thrill. We just did the DC Blues Society. Got the back. He's very expensive. So our opportunities to play with him have been very few.
Yeah.
Where I would like to do a lot more of it.
But,
But it takes a deep pocketbook to book him at this point.
Well, he gets big money in Europe. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Blues guys that can go over to Europe and make piles of dough, and they come back here, and it's like, unfortunately, a lot of times people don't know their name. All right, man. Well, thanks again, buddy.
Thank you.